Hello and welcome to this exciting Blender tutorial. Today we're gonna make this, so let's dive in. Let's select all these default objects and hit delete, then press Shift A and add a cylinder. Go into the properties and set the depth to 5. Then move the cylinder above the grid by pressing GZ and 2.5. Then go into the edit mode and select this top face. Press I to inset, then hold Ctrl and drag up and down to adjust the height of it. Something like this. Then press E to extrude the face and delete the top face. Then add 3 edge loops here by pressing Ctrl R and using the mouse wheel. Then give it a slight bevel, just a tiny bit. Then go into the extrude tool, click and hold and select extrude along normals and give it a slight inset. Then select this bottom face and press I to inset. Left click to confirm and I to inset again, press M to merge at center. Then go into the edge mode by pressing 2 and alt click on this edge loop to select it. Press Ctrl B to bevel and use scroll wheel to add segments. Then select this edge loop and give it a tiny bevel. Then let's go out of the edit mode and right click on the object, press shade smooth. Let's add a subdivision surface modifier by pressing Ctrl 1, and as you can see, after adding the modifier, the shape of our bottle is slightly changing. To prevent that, let's insert 2 edge loops here by pressing Ctrl R and scale them on the Z-axis. Now it holds the shape much better. Then let's add another cylinder, set the depth to 1 and move the cylinder above the bottle. Then go into the edit mode and insert an edge loop here and rotate it slightly. Then go into the X-ray mode by pressing Alt Z and select all these top faces and press P to separate them by selection. Now we have 2 different objects. Let's work on this one first. Isolate it by pressing /. Go into the edge mode and select this edge loop. Press E and Z to extrude and scale it on the same time. Go into the right view by pressing 3 and move it somewhere around here. Then extrude it once again. Then press S, Z and 0 to flatten it out. Now we'll add 2 edge loops here. One near the edge and one just after that. Then we'll select these 2 faces and extrude them. And select these 2 edges and move them on the Y-axis. So we have this kind of a shape. Now insert an edge loop here and select these 2 faces, insert them, and extrude them out. Oops, that's too much. Let's move them back a bit and scale them on the x-axis to get the taper shape. Then let's select these top and the bottom faces, press I to inset, and right click, select bridge faces to bridge them. And let's also delete this bottom face. Then let's go into the modifier tab and add a bevel modifier and also shade smooth this object. Then go into the geometry section and change the meter outer to arc. In the shading tab, press harden normals and change the width type to %. Now let's add a subdivision surface modifier. Change the level to 2. This edge here isn't looking good, so let's add some supporting loops here. Do here and scale them on the Z-axis so they hold the shape a bit better. Now it's looking good. Let's also give it some thickness by adding the solidify modifier. Move this on top of everything. Give it slight thickness. Now let's work on the top part of the cap. Isolate it, select this top face and inset it. Then go into the right view and move it somewhere here. Then inset it again and move it so we have an arc. Then let's select this edge loop and bevel it with one segment and insert an edge loop here. Select these 2 front faces and extrude them out. and scale them on the x-axis. Now let's add a solidify modifier and adjust the thickness. Then add a bevel modifier. Right click on the object and select Shade Smooth. Go into the geometry section and change the meter outer to arc, and in the shading section turn on harden normals and change the width type to %. And let's also add a subdivision surface modifier with the level 2. We have this sharp edge here which we don't really want, and we can easily fix it by going into the bevel modifier and increasing the angle. Now let's select both of these pieces and scale them down just a bit so they fit on our bottle better. Now let's add a circle. Rotate it by 90 degrees on the y-axis and scale it down and move it here. Then let's go into the edit mode and select all the vertices and scale it on the z-axis. Then scale it down on the y-axis to form this kind of a shape. Scale it down just a bit more and move it so it's on the right place. Then let's go into the data tab. In the geometry section, give it some extrude and also give it some depth. Now it's looking good. We can move it slightly. Then let's add a cube. Move it here, scale it down a bit more, and move it in place. Then let's select all these edges and press Ctrl B to bevel them. Then scale it down on the y-axis and scale it slightly on the x-axis. And we can also adjust the shape of our band so it fits inside this piece. Now let's delete this bottom face and shade smooth this object, and let's also add a subdivision surface modifier to it. Then let's add another circle. Move it here, rotate it on the y-axis by 90 degrees and place it here. Go into the edit mode and start adjusting the vertices so it looks like a strap. Adjust it here. Scale it down a bit more. Then let's also give it some extrude and some depth. Now for the liquid, add another cylinder and move it inside the bottle. Slightly down. Then change the pivot to 3D cursor and scale it on the z-axis. Then isolate it and go into the edit mode. Select this top face and delete it. Then select this edge loop, go into the face and select grid fill. You can adjust the offset if you like. And also let's add some supporting loops here. So when we add our subdivision modifier, it holds the shape. Select this edge loop and give it a tiny bevel. Now let's go into the sculpt mode. Press G to select the grab brush and F to adjust the radius and make some wave so it looks like water. Now for the ice cube, add a cube. Go into the edit mode, select all the faces and hit subdivide and set the level to 5. Now we have some geometry to work with. Then go into the modifier tab and add a displace modifier and click new to create a new texture. Now go into the texture tab and change the type to clouds. Now in the modifier tab we can adjust the strength of the displacement and also change the coordinates to global. This way, whenever we move or duplicate our object, it will look different. Now let's add subdivision surface modifier and shade smooth this object. Let's duplicate the ice cube, place one inside the water and rotate it. Place the other one like this. Now let's add a UV sphere. Move it here and scale it down. And also shade smooth this. Then select the UV sphere and the ice cube, go into the modifier tab, click on this drop down menu and select copy to selected. Now our bubble also has distortion. Let's place it inside the water. Scale it down, press Shift D to duplicate it. Place it here. Repeat the process to make as many bubbles as you want. Now let's organize our scene and rename everything. I'll fast forward the video and come back when it's done. And with that, our modeling part is done. Now before we start shading, let's add a backdrop. Go into the edit mode, select this edge and extrude it on the Z-axis. Select this edge and give it a bevel and add some segments. This should be fine. Then let's right click on this object and select shade smooth. And let's also scale it on the Y-axis so we have a wider background. Now we'll add a camera and find a good view. Something like this. Now press Ctrl Alt 0 to move the camera to this view. Go into the properties for the camera and set the focal length to 55 mm. And also in the output tab, change the resolution to 1000 by 1000 pixels. Our camera is a bit off, so let's press N. Go into the view tab and turn on camera to view so we can move our camera. Now let's disable camera to view so we don't accidentally move it. Now let's click and drag from this corner to split this editor horizontally and change the editor type to shader editor. And in the render tab, change the render engine to cycles and device to GPU. Now press Z and select render to see what we get. Since we don't have any lights in our scene, it's looking dark. So let's add a light. Change the editor type to world. Select this node and press Ctrl T. For this shortcut to work, you need to have the Node Wrangler add-on enabled, which you can easily enable by going into Preferences, Add-ons, and search Node Wrangler. Now let's click on Open and find an HDRI. I'm using this HDRI from Polyheaven. They have a lot of great HDRIs, so definitely go and check them out. Now we have nice lighting. You can also rotate the HDRI if you want. Now let's select the background, change it to object, and add a new material. And set the base color to something like this. Let's also go into the 3D view and add an area light. scale it on the x-axis, rotate it and place it something like this. So we have some light on our background, and in the properties change the power to 4000. Maybe that's too much. Let's try scaling it down on the y-axis. So we have really thin light. Looks much better. Now let's switch to shader editor. Select the bottle and add a new material. Set the roughness to 0 and set the transmission value to 1. Select the liquid, add a new material. Set the roughness to 0 and transmission weight to all the way 1. Change the IOR to 1.33 and the base color to an orangish tone. Something like this. Now let's select the cap, add a new material, and give it the same color. Set the roughness to almost 0. Then let's select the top part of the cap, add new material, change the base color to same as the lower part. Reduce the roughness to about 0.2. And set the transmission weight to 1. Now let's select the band, add a new material, and give it a darker color. Select this object, add a new material, set the base color close to black, and reduce the roughness so it looks like plastic. Now let's select our strap, give it a new material, and set the base color matching to our overall theme. Then let's add a noise texture node and select the shader node and press Ctrl T to get this node set up. We don't want the image texture node, so let's delete it and connect the vector output to the vector input of the noise texture node. Then let's add a bump node and connect our noise texture in the height input of it, and connect the normal output in our shader. Now increase the scale of the noise. And adjust the strength of the bump, so we only have a subtle bump. Now it looks much better. Now for the ice cube, give it a new material, delete the shader, and add a glass BSDF node. Now let's select all the bubbles and the ice cube, and then select the ice cube with the material, press Ctrl N and select Link Materials to link the material to all of the objects. Let's adjust the intensity of our light. Something like this. Let's also duplicate this light and place it somewhere here. And from the top view, rotate it so it faces our bottle. And let's also scale it on the local y-axis, so we have this nice reflection on top of our bottle. Move it a bit to the side. Now let's reduce the intensity of the light to 1000 or maybe 800. Now the only thing remaining here is to add the logo on top of the bottle. But in order to do that, we need to have UVs. So let's select the bottle and go into the UV editing view. Go into the camera view, select everything by pressing A, then go to UV, project from view. Then go into the front view and select all the back faces, go into the UV editor, turn the sync on and move them on the side. Now we can place the logo on top. For that, select the shader, press Ctrl T, click open. I have this black and white logo here. So let's open it. At the moment it's not looking right because we need to connect it in the transmission weight instead of base color. And then add an invert color node. Now the logo looks correct, but its placement is off. So let's go into the UV view, place your cursor on top of it and press L to select all the link faces. Then move it so our logo is in center and scale it down. Let's go into the layout view again. Move this light a little bit to the left side so the reflection is not on top of our logo. Let's also reduce the intensity a bit. Now for the final render, go into the render tab and set the max samples to 512, and in the performance tab, change the tile size to 512. Then we can go hit render. Now one last thing, let's add some post-processing to improve our output. Go into the compositing tab, click on use nodes, then Ctrl Shift and left click on this node to view it. Move this to the side, search for mask and add an ellipse mask. Adjust the width and the height to match the frame. Add an invert color. Then add a blur node and give it a big blur, something like 500. Now let's add a hue saturation value node and connect the blur node to it. Ctrl Shift and left click on the hue saturation value node to view it and reduce the value to add some vignette. Now when we go and hit render, the final image will have the post-processing applied.